Welcome in, everybody. We're excited to be jumping in today with our webinar of the challenge of delivering GIS at the point of need. You can see we've got Colin online. He'll be presenting today's topic. So we want to welcome you in, and Colin, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, thank you, Brett. We can just look at the challenge of delivering GIS at the point of need. Very interesting topic for me. I find it challenging as to what we're doing and how we're doing it as GIS professionals. And so we'll jump right in. So overall, the agenda is looking at, what's special about GIS, why location, how do we actually present information, what aspects are important, where do we get other data from, a couple of examples and everyday scenarios, and then just looking at the practicalities of rolling this out at an organization. So there are essentially, I've identified 4 elements that make GIS actionable. And that's sort of, what is the point of need and what are those aspects? So there's a point of need model, if you will, fancy name really, for some fairly fundamental things. Obviously, information is important. Things like asset records, conditions, the work orders, a lot of different items are just the information. To be important also to note that metadata, the information about the data that you're looking at or using, is also important, and then regulatory values and governance and all of that. But it does require a structured data set with clear schemas and consistent values. The context also probably primary. Most people would start there, I suppose, but that is who's doing what and what do they need to get done, what they need to do. And so really it's what's the task, what's the time frame, operating constraints, service levels, is it urgent, is it regulatory, are there a set of steps they have to check off, is it a current system, things like outages, permits, hazards, any kind of time slot or window of opportunity when work has to get done, is it after hours, is it during whatever breaks or anything like that. And then also the context, what interface is the user actually using to figure out or to get what you're trying to deliver. So these two really are nothing to do with GIS, except that obviously delivering GIS requires that. But any kind of having something at the point of need would need the info and the context. And of course, the role. So who's doing what? What is their responsibility? Are they the overall, emergency situation manager? Or are they on the ground in front of a particular asset, customer, incident, or anything like that? So what's the role? Very, very important, because what we're trying to do is refine down the appropriate data at the given instance. And then obviously for GIS, we bring in the location piece. And this also helps to refine anything that's got a point in time that can be located and mapped and tracked and even compared against anything else, is where we come in as GIS professionals. The position of assets, even crowd management, people or events, proximity to any of those things, tracking within a network, connectivity. And so it's a little more than location, because we also got the assets that go with that. And so we add that, and that is essentially what I would call the point of need for GIS. So what we want to do is have an actionable plan at that point of need where we bring in location and deliver that value to that instance. So that's sort of the goal. And it's really, in modern times, great that we have so much technology that we can do that. There's a lot of things that we need to look at. So let's jump into those. So that's sort of the context. GIS adds an additional value to that model within any organization's operations or planning or any of those things. So why location? Well, it's all about, what is here, what do we need to do? And so it's a combination of that location. So if you're in the field, it's what's here. If you're in utilities, it might be connectivity things about supply disconnection or any of that, or flow coming in or anything like that. If it's a control room, you're going to have things like, what are the main issues? What resources do we have? How do we rearrange those, reallocate them? And is often sometimes location dependent, particularly if they're spread out and have to get relocated to any given incident. Okay, so why location? I was giving some examples, but if there's no accurate current spatial references, then any of these questions that we've got listed here are going to become somewhat guesswork. We don't know if it applies to here or over there or any of that. And so you really need the 4 dimensions to make something actionable. And so within the context of GIS professionals, this is what we're trying to do, is enable much better decisions with good information and how to deliver those. And so really we want to use that location as an anchor, as a filter of what is important, what also needs to be known, what are the other close by risks, opportunities, how do you prioritize and make those best actions. So it's sort of a little bit of interaction. As GIS professionals, we enter into this realm of organizational systems and being a key part for these particular kinds of questions to be impacted. So how do we actually then present location and task relevant data? So first thing is also bearing in mind, just like any point of need, different roles require different presentations. So sometimes it might be a map, sometimes it might just be an address, sometimes it might be a lat long, sometimes it might be an entire zone. And that could come as an SMS, text, could come as a screenshot or a picture or a street view picture or, oblique aerial, or come as a modeled result of an analytic that's been done. So all of those would be things that you would need to look at. So make the point that it's not just the actual spatial assets. It's actually also the other data that goes with it, because we need to filter both that location and the business systems. We need to have all of that working together. And that also has to be, delivered through secure services and events. So let's drill into that a little more. So presenting location and task relevant data. So obviously the format. So if it's mobile, then that is, if it's somebody doing inspections or markups or restorations, or if they're in the field and they're offline, then that's a challenge. If it's a situation where it's a resultant page on a web page. So for example, am I the only one without electricity at this address, or is it a complete zone? That could be a web page on the electric supplier's system, and that could be filtered with all sorts of intelligence, or it could have actually input from people with outages or any of those sorts of things. Or it could be planned where they actually have something going on and they put a map out. So it could be an embedded map inside of any kind of system. I said a web page, it could be in the asset management system, it could be the work order system or any of that. So embedded maps, or in fact, a dedicated map. If you're looking at a presentation of, what's the new development plan, maybe you need a dedicated map that kind of walks you through it, shows the detailed stuff and the big picture and a whole lot of those things. Or if it's a much wider outage management or anything like that, or maps like many places would have, where are all the capital works going on? So where is the, actual road closures or any kind of, cordoning off of things for works to occur. So that could be a dedicated map. Operational dashboards would be another one. So, you might have IoT stuff coming into locations on a map, and that might be live in an operational dashboard. It could, in fact, be a set of charts of performance or things like speed or whatever, where you see the map and you're looking at stats by zone or by whatever it is. There's also time aware viewings, things like animations and sliders, like what was it like before, what's it like now? How do you make those decisions? Even things like maps of, fire movement across an entire space and modeling that out and where was it, where is it now, and stuff like that. So once again, relevant to the role of the person. Are they the fire chief or are they the crew on the ground? And what information do they need to see for their particular point of view and stuff like that. Proactive notifications, evacuations, things tied to geography, like, evacuation would be an example. Say there's a river coming down in flood. How do you show people where that is? So you might get a text, or there might be some sort of phone system, but there might also be a map to show exactly where it is. so that it's more located and it's not just on a given, phone code or whatever. And so that also is tied to role. Are you the person on the ground trying to get out of the way, or are you the person trying to manage stuff? So a whole lot of things where these aspects come to it. Is it analytics, decision support, where you're modeling things out, cost, things like, so a project I was involved in is what's the cost over time to replace failing infrastructure, say a pipe network or electric or whatever, and how does that map out across the organization, and what's the actual expected cost, say in today's dollars, and tying in risk to that as well. If there's a risk of failure, tie that in so that you can optimize and present in GIS not only the map but also the listing and the stats of what's it going to do over time and what's it going to cost to replace, so that people can plan on that. So just at the point of need, that would be a point of need. Systems integrations, this has become much easier and a lot more options, but it's also more critical as we expect more real-time data, as we expect up-to-date data, and we expect to be able to get data from multiple sources. APIs are really, really important, getting information from all over the place. And GIS as a technology is an integrating technology. It covers multiple departments, multiple uses, which is why we can work through all of these examples, and also makes it fairly interesting as far as I'm concerned. So integrations, I really can't say enough about that, because it's not just, you don't want all of the asset information or all of the operational information about an asset in your GIS. You might have that in an asset management system and or a work order management system, and tie those all together, as well as even accounting where you're looking at those roles. So things with routing and dispatch, that brings together a whole lot of things, the resources, the capabilities, the distance on the network, etc. Task awareness, it comes there, things like permits or hazards or planned works, etc. You've got to have that and look at it. One that I've been involved in is moratoriums on ripping up streets in a large city, and you have multiple telecom providers, electric providers, natural gas, water, sewer, and sidewalks and actual road surface pavement. That stuff really has to be coordinated. So you need to have then GIS is really a good way of saying, hey, this zone is in a moratorium for another 2 years. Those ones is coming up. So often what will happen in that instance was, if a moratorium of say 5 years, where if the road surface has been ripped up, nobody can then rip that up within a 5-year period, or if they have to, they're going to pay a premium and cover the entire cost, and then try and coordinate everyone else to do their work at the same time and stuff like that. So very interesting GIS thing. So integration services, really important. Starting to request, publish, and automate that can be done with your GIS. Things like IoT, what's the current air quality? What's the traffic? What's the, various cameras or any of those things? People can look at trends, look at them on a map, and have those integrated. Validation and automation, really important. These systems are only as good as the data. The quality data, the completeness of the data, the accuracy of the data, and even knowing where it came from and what its history is so important. And that ties in with this. So the infrastructure and data are essentially major foundations, cloud-based stuff, the APIs we talked about, and integration across, broad scale or very local specific stuff. Absolutely important. Documenting things, analytics platforms, using standards to allow for data to get moved and understood between different contexts within an organization, really important. Data itself, basically, you want to produce the, whatever you can afford, but the best quality and completeness of any data that you put in. And be sure to have the metadata. People need to know, well, this was captured by somebody walking by, or it was captured as survey grade, but it's a year old as opposed to 20 years ago. That metadata. Things like coordinate systems are a minimum. So things like authoritative sources. Also, who owns them? Like, who's responsible? Is this line that we see on the map an electric cable, or is it just sort of a guess that it goes there somewhere? Do we know if we actually got that from the provider, and is it up to date? And if something goes wrong, who do you tell? How do you deal with it? Keep schemas, domains, and coordinate systems clearly documented. So all modern GISs have this ability to self-describe most of the schemas and all that stuff. And you really need to fill that in. Just because it's available, but if it's not filled in, it's a problem when you try and share data or reuse it or spread it or anything else. Right? Capture the highest quality data you can afford at the time of construction or deployment or capture, if you will. Really, really important. Deal with as much other stuff that's there, because within GIS, we can bring together a lot of things. Sometimes a map is worth 1,000 words as a picture. Sometimes it just needs to be a report. So data is mission critical. Looking at, refresh and audits, who changed what? Why did they change it? So because if people can't trust what they see, you can have the prettiest 3D map. If the data's old or bad, it's really just a pretty picture. It's not going to be usable further than visualization. All right, so if we look at everyday scenarios, there's a bunch of these examples. So I've mentioned a few of these, but like public movement and operations, that would be something that you want to look at. Things like public movement. If you ever try and find your way around a strange place, you're going to look at a map. That needs to be up to date, but maybe it needs to have your context. A simple example would be like the one below, the airport connection. So quite a few of the airline apps now will have a map of the airport, and they will know your details, that you need to go from this terminal to that gate, and you need to take this route to get there. And that can be, multiple stories. It can be trams or buses, and then pathways through buildings that may have any number of corridors or even tunnels or whatever it is. It's a thing. Dial before you dig is obviously a very clear one, and most of those are working fairly well, and you get multiple organizations' information coming to you. And there's governance has an issue there, because even though it'll be entirely possible to have one map with all of it on, we probably need the crew to actually come and check and scan and do everything else until one has survey quality certified information. They would then be able to automate that without having to send somebody out there. So work management in context, what we're looking at is, things like technicians can see additional tasks while they're out there, changes to, say, designs or build outs. If somebody is out on the job doing some work and they need additional resource, where's the closest one of those? How can they get it there? So there's a lot of stuff there where GIS can play a role. Retail and facility logistics. If you've ever walked around a large place and you want to know, where you are or where you can find something, that'd be exactly, facility logistics. Tie that in with RFID stuff, anything like that. Another thing where GIS can come in. Emergency and natural disaster response, I think, is one that we're very familiar with. What's the life status? What are the sensors? What are isolation plans or mitigation plans, moving people in and out, getting people in for given disasters or situations, rapid coordination that's changing, and multiple players. So that one is fairly useful. Here's one, lead service line identification. So the EPA and the US have been requiring this for a number of years now. And I've been involved in some of those projects where we'll look at a map of and pull building permits from the building department and pull those against parcels and go and look at age of when the first building was. Because if the first building permit was, more recent, then it's probably not going to have a lead service line. But if the building permit was in 30s and 40s, yeah, then it probably might have a service line. But did somebody already check that? So you can then tie that in with work orders and maintenance systems and start refining that so that they can have a plan. So one of the things is to present to the EPA, here's the analysis we've done, here's how our organization, so you're a water utility, here's how we prioritize, how we find these, how we replace them, and then track what's been done. So GIS play a huge role in that sort of thing. Just a word of caution, with modern GISs, the world is fantastic in terms of what we can present. And often that gets gets people all excited And my sort of, been in the business for many years, but my view on that is, look at criticality. What is the business need? How critical is it? How much is it going to cost? What's the benefit analysis? If it's not critical, maybe just a simple map might be fine. If it really is critical, then you can go into a full-blown apps and maps and dedicated feeds and everything else. And so that's the fun part is identifying those. But really, just because you like a 3D picture doesn't mean that's the best mechanism for delivering the solution. Maybe it is, and certainly in some cases, absolutely it is. But if you've got no data of that and it's merely just a sort of extrapolated model, then it's visualization, but it's not real measured information. So, look at all of those different things. But being explicit about criticality, is this more important than that? If we spend our money on this, can we do that? How long would it actually take us to get all the data at the level needed to satisfy a particular question? And that's in operational criticality and security situations, very, very important. And GIS can certainly play a part in that. So the wants versus needs, it just kind of is a little temper that on that. And then I just have one last slide on closing, and we can take a look at that. So my view is GIS at the point of need is not about creating more maps or another online portal. It's really about delivering value, location-based information that has real value in the particular context. And so, when decisions are being made or when tasks happen, just producing that and delivering that is something that absolutely can be done. But we really kind of want to shoot for those. And within the context of, it needs to be good data. It needs to be reliable, repeatable, and automated as far as possible. But if an organization can align the information and look at the context, identify the roles and location, and sort of treat that as appropriate information, then the location part of this equation really, really helps. People can move faster, they get less errors. It can be, life and death. It can be real impacts on communities. It can be impacts on service. It can be impacts on individuals. So really quite a big deal and very exciting to be a part of that. So just essentially at that point, happy to take any questions. We do kind of regular webinars. Sometimes they're more generic industry stuff like today, which is great. And sometimes it's very much specific products like, hey, here's a case study. Here's how we did that. Or here's our product is great for this. Obviously, we're going to do that from time to time. But all in all, the goal is to just continue to expand the value of GIS. And if our products are useful in that, that's great. So thank you very much and wishing you all the best for the rest of your day.